What if your ex-wife cheated with your brother then came back to stalk you and your new life? You know, life has this strange way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. One moment, you think you've got everything figured out, marriage, family, a roof over your head, and the next, the ground beneath you crumbles. That's what happened to me. And looking back, maybe the cracks had been there all along. I just didn't want to see them. My name's James. I'm 42 years old, a construction foreman by trade. And until not too long ago, I thought I was living a solid, stable life. I had a wife, Caitlin, who I'd been married to for 15 years, and 2 kids who were my whole world, Susan, who's 12, and Harry, who just turned 9. On paper, it looked like the American dream, but dreams can turn to dust faster than you'd think. Caitlin. Well, she wasn't the easiest person to live with. I used to tell myself she just had a fiery personality. But the truth is, she had some serious anger issues. It wasn't the kind of normal back and forth that couples go through. No. When she got mad, it was like a storm tearing through the house. She'd slam doors so hard they left marks on the walls, scream until the neighbors could hear, even throw things when she lost control. And the worst part? The kids started tiptoeing around her, hiding in their rooms whenever her temper flared. Meanwhile, I was working 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week sometimes, trying to keep us afloat. Being a foreman isn't glamorous, but it pays the bills, and I wanted Caitlin and the kids to have a good life. But every time I walked through that door, bone-tired, hoping for some peace, I'd be met with another round of complaints. I wasn't home enough. I wasn't helping enough. I wasn't fun anymore. At family gatherings, she'd make me the butt of her jokes. James is basically another kid in the house, she'd say with that little smirk, while everyone laughed awkwardly. He doesn't do anything but work and sleep. My mother would look at me with pity, and I'd just sit there, swallowing the sting, telling myself it was no big deal. But it was. It chipped away at me, piece by piece. Things really started spiraling about 2 years ago, after my older brother Connor's divorce. Now, Connor, he's always been the charming one. The loud, funny guy who could light up a room just by walking in. He worked as a sales manager at a car dealership, which suited him perfectly because he could talk anybody into anything. Me? I've always been the quiet, steady type, the guy people rely on to get things done, not the one telling jokes at the barbecue. When Connor's marriage fell apart, he moved back to our town, and suddenly he was around all the time. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was family, and we wanted to support him. But then I noticed Caitlin how she started putting more effort into her appearance when she knew Connor was coming over. She'd do her hair, put on makeup, even buy new dresses, all for a casual get-together in our backyard. Connor, for his part, seemed to play right into it. He'd show up with gifts for the kids, flowers for Caitlin, acting like it was just being polite. Funny thing is, he never brought anything when he visited other relatives. Just for Caitlin, and she lit up around him in a way she hadn't for me in years. I remember Christmas like it was yesterday. We hosted dinner, and Caitlin pulled out all the stops, perfect decorations, a brand new dress, even had her nails done. I watched her and Connor at the table, laughing, finishing each other's sentences, sharing these little inside jokes. I tried to join in, but they'd shut me out. Change the subject. Later that night, I found them on the back porch, their heads close together, whispering. They jumped apart when I walked out. Caitlin said they were just talking about Connor's job situation. I told myself I was being paranoid. I wanted so badly to believe that. But by January, Caitlin started staying out late, saying she was helping friends, or working overtime at the dental office. She'd come home at 10, shower, and head straight to bed, barely speaking a word to me. My gut told me something was wrong, but I didn't want to face it. And then came Valentine's Day. The day everything fell apart. I'd decided, in a last-ditch effort to fix things, to surprise Caitlin with lunch at her office. But when I showed up, her coworker told me she'd called in sick. That sinking feeling hit me in the chest. I drove home, and there it was, Connor's truck in my driveway. I unlocked the door, walked inside, and found them together on my couch. And here's the thing, Caitlin didn't even bother to deny it. She just looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'm done pretending." Connor grabbed his shirt and walked out without a word. And just like that, 15 years of marriage went up in flames. She told me she'd been seeing him for 3 months. That Connor made her laugh. That I was boring, always tired, no fun. She said he understood her in a way I never had. The divorce was fast. She didn't fight me on anything. Moved in with Connor across town, leaving me and the kids to pick up the pieces. Harry, my little boy, kept asking when mommy was coming home. Susan tried to act tough, but I could see the hurt written all over her face. For months, I was a shell of myself. Drop the kids at school, go to work, pick them up, make dinner, collapse into bed. Weekends were the worst, empty, silent. the house echoing with absence. Then came Kim. My buddy Tom had been nagging me to go out for drinks after work, but I kept refusing. I wasn't ready. Finally, in June, I caved. We went to a bar downtown, and that's where I met her. Kim was there celebrating her sister's promotion. She's 37, works in marketing, and from the moment we started talking, it just felt different. She wasn't trying too hard, wasn't looking for drama. She just listened. Really listened. We spent hours talking about everything under the sun, except my divorce. And for the first time in a long time, I felt heard. We started seeing each other slowly. No pressure. She respected that I was still healing. She came over sometimes, helped with dinner or homework. Susan and Harry warmed up to her almost instantly. She didn't force it, didn't try to replace their mom. She treated them like people, not pawns. And you know what? That mattered more than anything. Kim has her own little house 20 minutes away, smaller than mine, but peaceful. We'd spend weekends there when the kids were with Caitlin. And for the first time in months, I could breathe again. But of course, Caitlin found out. And that's when things took a turn I never could have imagined. She completely lost it. First, it was phone calls at all hours, demanding to know who Kim was, why I was introducing strangers to her kids. I reminded her she was living with my brother, that she had no say in my personal life anymore. But that didn't stop her. She started showing up at my house unannounced, under the excuse of checking on the kids. Funny thing was, they were always at school when she came. She'd prowl through my home, looking for signs of Kim. Once, she found Kim's coffee mug in the sink and threw it in the trash. The night Kim stayed over when the kids were home, Caitlin called the police. Said I was exposing her children to danger. The officer was polite but basically told her she had no grounds unless there was actual harm. That didn't stop her either. She began interrogating the kids. Susan told me her mom made her promise to report everything Kim said or did. Harry started having nightmares. And then came the baseball game. Kim and I had taken the kids downtown for a day of fun. Popcorn, hot dogs, the works. For once, the kids were just being kids, laughing, carefree. But then, during the 7th inning stretch, I spotted them, Caitlin and Connor, sitting 10 rows behind us, watching. When we left, she followed us to the parking lot. Walked right up to Kim and said, "Stay away from my children." Kim, calm as ever, told her she respected her role as their mother, but that boundaries had to be respected. That's when Caitlin exploded, screamed that Kim was trying to replace her, that I was selfish, that I was confusing the kids. And then she said something that sent chills down my spine. "I know where you live, and this isn't over." Since then, she's been driving past Kim's house, following her on social media with fake accounts, even sending anonymous flowers with threatening notes. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just bitterness. It was obsession. And things were only going to get worse from here. After that night at the baseball game, things went from uncomfortable to downright alarming. Caitlin wasn't just angry or jealous anymore, she was unraveling. And the problem with someone unraveling is, you never know how far they're willing to go. The morning after that confrontation in the parking lot, Kim found her neighbor waiting outside with a worried look. "There's been a car parked across the street at odd hours," the neighbor said. "Same one, over and over. Woman inside, just watching the house." And I didn't even need to ask. I already knew. Caitlin had gone from angry phone calls to full-on surveillance. And as much as I wanted to tell myself she'd stop, that this was just a phase, the truth was staring me in the face. She wasn't going to stop. It got worse. Kim came home from work one afternoon to find flowers waiting on her desk. At first glance, it seemed sweet. But then, she read the note. "Stay away from what isn't yours. No name, paid for in cash." Just a shadowy threat wrapped in a bouquet. That night, Kim looked at me across the dinner table, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed food around her plate. "James," she said, her voice quiet. "Is this really worth it? I mean, I care about you. I care about the kids. But is it worth this level of drama? Your ex-wife is. She's not letting go. What if she escalates?" And the thing is, I couldn't blame her for asking that. She hadn't signed up for this. None of it was fair to her. But the thought of Caitlin controlling my life, controlling whether I could be happy again, made me sick. Still, I could see the fear in Kim's eyes. She was strong, yes. Calm, yes. But fear? It was there. Lingering. And it broke my heart. That's when I knew I had to take real steps. No more hoping Caitlin would magically come to her senses. No more excuses. I started documenting everything. Every phone call, every strange car sighting, every message. I logged the times, the dates, even screenshots of the fake social media accounts. I felt like some sort of detective in my own life, but it was the only way to build a record. And just in time too, because 2 weeks later, things exploded. Kim and I had planned a camping trip with the kids. Nothing fancy, just a state park a couple of hours away. We packed the tent, marshmallows, fishing poles, the whole deal. Susan and Harry were over the moon. For once, they were acting like kids again, excited and carefree. The first night went perfectly. Marshmallows roasted, ghost stories told, cards played by flashlight. I remember thinking, finally. A break from all the madness. We may come today. But peace never lasts long when Caitlin is involved. The next morning, we took one of the easy trails. The kids ran ahead, pointing out wildflowers, laughing, trying to spot squirrels. By lunchtime, we were headed back to the campsite, hungry and ready to relax. And there she was, Caitlin, sitting at our picnic table like she owned the place. I froze. My heart dropped into my stomach. Susan and Harry immediately went silent, slipping behind Kim and me like shadows. Caitlin stood up, her voice sharp and loud enough for nearby campers to hear. "You kidnapped my children!" she screamed. "You don't have permission to take them out of state." "We're still in state, Caitlin," I said firmly, trying to keep my own temper in check. "And it's my weekend. You know that." But she wasn't hearing me. She kept shouting, drawing attention from other families. People started drifting closer, curious, concerned. She pointed at Kim, spitting venom with every word. "You homewrecker, you're turning my kids against me. You think you can replace me? You're nothing." Kim tried to defuse the situation, her voice calm. "Caitlin, we're just here for the kids. No one's replacing anyone. Let's talk. Don't you dare speak about my children." Caitlin snapped, her face twisted with rage. The camp host finally stepped in, asking to see paperwork. Luckily, I'd brought a copy of our custody agreement, tucked into my bag out of pure paranoia. He read it, nodded, and told Caitlin she needed to leave, but she refused. "I'm not going anywhere without my children," she cried, now switching gears, tears streaming as she put on a performance for the crowd. "He's taking them away from me. I'm just a mother trying to protect them." Susan broke then. She started crying, asking why mommy was being so mean. Harry clung to Kim's leg, burying his face, refusing to look at his mother. And that seemed to send Caitlin spiraling further. She accused Kim of poisoning the kids, of destroying their family, of turning me against her. The camp host threatened to call the police if she didn't leave. Finally, after more yelling and crying, she stormed off, but not before throwing one last dagger at me. "This isn't over, James. You'll regret this." We tried to salvage the trip, but the kids were shaken, so we packed up and left early. When we pulled up at my house that evening, I found the front door and windows splattered with dried egg yolk. And my neighbor? She'd seen Caitlin's car slowly circling the block earlier that day. That was it for me. Enough was enough. Monday morning, I called my lawyer. He listened carefully, then said the words I'd been avoiding for months. "It's time to file for a restraining order." He told me we had plenty of evidence already: my documentation, the eyewitnesses at the campsite, the vandalism. Caitlin's behavior wasn't just bitter ex-wife territory anymore. It was harassment, it was stalking, and it was putting everyone, especially the kids, in danger. So we filed. But Caitlin? She wasn't about to go quietly. 2 days before the hearing, I got a phone call from Connor. My brother, the man who blew up my marriage. We hadn't spoken since the day I caught him on my couch with Caitlin. His voice was tired, almost broken. "James, you've got to help me. Caitlin's driving me insane. She won't stop talking about you, about Kim. It's destroying everything. She's obsessed." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "This is the situation you created, Connor. You wanted her? Well, you've got her. Figure it out yourself." But then he said something that chilled me. "She's been calling your workplace, James, telling them you're stealing company time, using equipment for personal stuff, trying to get you fired." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about jealousy anymore. Caitlin was waging a war. She wanted to dismantle my life, piece by piece. When the restraining order went to court, the judge didn't hesitate. He looked at the evidence, the stalking, the vandalism, the threats, and granted it. Caitlin was ordered to stay at least 100 yards away from me, from Kim, and from Kim's house and workplace. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe we could breathe again. But as I would soon learn, Caitlin wasn't done. Not even close. I thought the restraining order would finally put an end to Caitlin's chaos. For a moment, it even felt like maybe, just maybe, we could settle into something normal again. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can't expect rational behavior from someone who's already lost their grip on reality. Caitlin wasn't done. Not by a long shot. At first, she obeyed the letter of the restraining order. She didn't come within the 100-yard boundary. She didn't call me directly, but she found ways to worm her way around it, ways to keep her presence felt in our lives, even if she wasn't technically breaking the law. Like when the kids came back from their visits with her, they carried little messages. Mom wants to know if Kim is moving in, Susan would say awkwardly. Or Harry would repeat, Mom asked if you're going to marry Kim. She was using them as messengers, planting her obsession in their minds. It was manipulative, cruel, and worst of all, it put them right in the middle of a war they never asked to fight. Then she started scheduling unavoidable appointments during my custody time. Doctor's visits, dentist checkups, even random school events. Suddenly, all of them fell on my weekends. When I pushed back, she'd smile that cold smile and say, the kids' health comes first. Their education comes first. Don't you care about that? She was technically right, which made it even harder. She wasn't blatantly breaking the law, but the pattern was obvious. Every move designed to chip away at my time with the kids. To make my life with Kim feel impossible. Kim and I had a hard conversation then. She told me she was willing to stick it out, but she needed honesty. James, I care about you. I care about Susan and Harry. But how bad is this going to get? I can't pretend it's not affecting me, and I had no good answer. I didn't know how far Caitlin would go, but we held on. And then, 6 weeks later, everything changed. It started with a phone call from Linda, my brother Connor's ex-wife. I hadn't spoken to her in years, not since before Caitlin blew up our marriage. When I saw her name flash on my phone, I hesitated, but something in me said to pick up. James, she said, her voice trembling. I know this is out of the blue, but we need to talk. It's about Caitlin. It's about your kids. That got my attention real quick. We met at a diner across town, away from any place Caitlin might spot us. Linda looked terrible, thin, exhausted, the kind of look someone wears when they haven't been sleeping for weeks. She didn't waste time. Connor's been calling me, she said, gripping her coffee cup like it was the only thing holding her steady. He says Caitlin's obsession with you and Kim has taken over her life. She spends hours every day parked outside Kim's house, keeping notebooks of her schedule, who she talks to, where she shops. And James. She hesitated, her voice catching. He says she's been talking about making Kim disappear. I felt the blood drain from my face. Disappear? What do you mean move away? What have you meant, sir? But if you meant to be why? Linda shook her head slowly. He's not sure. But she's been researching Kim's background, her family, her workplace. He says Caitlin talks about it like an obsession, and when he tried to pull away, she threatened him. Said she'd accuse him of stalking you. Or worse, say he'd been inappropriate with Susan and Harry. My stomach twisted. I asked Linda why she was telling me this now, after everything that had happened. She lowered her eyes, tears spilling onto her hands. Because, despite everything, I don't want to see innocent people get hurt. Not Kim. Not your kids. And Connor. As much as he's to blame for all of this, he's scared of her. I've never seen him like this. And Sue never and too had. Concerning to Mile, I left that diner shaking. Went straight to my lawyer. He didn't hesitate. You need to go to the police. Now. So I did. The detective listened carefully, and when I showed him the logs, the screenshots, the photos, he nodded. They'd investigate. The hardest part, though, was telling Kim. I sat her down that night and told her everything Linda had shared. Watching her face go pale, watching her hands tremble, nearly broke me. She had every right to run, every right to say it wasn't worth the danger. But she didn't. Instead, she squared her jaw. We'll handle this. But we're not letting her win. We bought security cameras for both houses, changed Kim's work schedule so she wouldn't be predictable. Her company even agreed to let her work from home for a while, and then, the police investigation started moving faster than I expected. Connor confirmed everything. He admitted Caitlin had filled notebook after notebook with details about Kim's daily life. He confessed that she'd stolen mail from Kim's box, opening credit card bills and utility statements, piecing together private details. But the most chilling piece of evidence was a recording Connor had made on his phone. Caitlin, in one of her rants, saying she wished Kim would just die in a car accident. Saying how easy it would be to cause one on the winding road near Kim's house. That was it. That was the line. The police arrested Caitlin the very next day. When they searched her place, they found the notebooks Linda had described. They found photos of Kim taken without her knowledge. They even found notes detailing Kim's daily commute. And Caitlin? She didn't go quietly. As they led her away, she screamed that I had ruined her life. That Kim was destroying her family. That everyone was conspiring against her. The kids weren't home to see it, thank God. But they found out anyway. Small towns don't keep secrets. Susan asked if Mommy was going to jail. Harry asked if it was his fault. And in that moment, I realized just how much damage Caitlin had already done. The judge tightened the restraining order after her release, bumping it to 500 yards, taking her passport, banning her from electronics. She lost custody entirely, until she agreed to psychological evaluations and anger management. She refused, of course, which meant no visitation. For the first time in years, Susan's stomachache stopped. Harry started sleeping through the night again, and Kim, God bless her, stood by me through all of it. But the story wasn't finished. Because Caitlin still had to face trial. By the time Caitlin's trial rolled around, I thought I'd already seen the worst of it. The stalking, the screaming, the lies, it all felt like she had shown every card in her hand. But the truth? I hadn't even scratched the surface of just how deep her obsession went. The courtroom was packed the day it began. Small town, big drama, people came out like it was the event of the year. Some to support me, some out of morbid curiosity, and some, honestly, just to gossip. I sat there with Kim at my side. Susan and Harry thankfully excused from having to testify. My lawyer flipping through pages of carefully organized evidence. Caitlin walked in, chin high, eyes blazing like she was the victim in all this. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her but then I remembered the fear in my kid's eyes. Kim's hands trembling as she read that anonymous note. The eggs dripping down my front door. And that pity hardened into resolve. The prosecution laid it all out. The stalking, the harassment, the vandalism. They had photos, screenshots, witness statements. They played Connor's recording, Caitlin wishing Kim would just die in a car accident, talking about how easy it would be to make one happen. You could hear a ripple move through the courtroom when that audio hit the speakers. But the most disturbing evidence? Her journal. The police had found it during the search. A thick notebook filled cover to cover with her handwriting. Detailed fantasies of hurting Kim. Lists of ways to get rid of her. Notes on how to follow someone without being detected. How to make anonymous calls. Even research into Kim's family members. I remember glancing at Kim as the prosecutor read passages aloud. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. She squeezed my hand under the table, reminding me without words that we were in this together. Caitlin's court-appointed lawyer tried to spin it as a mental health crisis brought on by the divorce. She wasn't thinking clearly, he argued. She was overwhelmed, unstable. This wasn't malice, it was desperation. But the prosecution wasn't buying it. And neither was the judge. They pointed out how calculated it all was. The notes weren't random scribbles. They were methodical, planned, deliberate. This wasn't impulsive rage. This was obsession. And Caitlin? She showed no remorse. None. She stood there, ranting about how I had orchestrated everything. How I had bribed Connor and Linda to lie. How everyone was jealous of her relationship. At one point, she even accused the judge of bias. When the verdict came guilty on multiple counts of stalking, harassment, and mail theft, Caitlin finally cracked. She screamed that it was all Kim's fault. That I would pay. That she'd never forgive us. The bailiffs had to drag her out of the courtroom. The sentence, 18 months in jail, followed by 3 years of probation. On top of that, she had to complete anger management and a psychological evaluation before she could even think about petitioning for visitation rights with Susan and Harry. The most chilling detail, though, came at sentencing. The prosecution revealed that when police searched Caitlin's car, they found a baseball bat in the trunk. Alongside it, printed maps of Kim's office building, with notes about her daily schedule. She hadn't just thought about confrontation, she had been preparing for it. I felt sick. Connor testified too. And I'll be honest, it was strange seeing him on that stand. The man who'd betrayed me in the worst way, now standing there admitting he'd been afraid of Caitlin for months. He told the court how she'd threatened to accuse him of things he hadn't done if he ever tried to leave her. How she spent more time stalking me and Kim than actually being present with their relationship or with the kids during her custody time. That testimony shut the door on any chance of them reconciling. And, funny enough, after the trial ended, Connor moved back in temporarily with Linda. Word around town was they were trying to rebuild their relationship. I didn't care much either way. To me, Connor would always be the man who blew up my family. But at least he finally did one thing right. Telling the truth about Caitlin. The aftermath hit the kids hardest. Susan asked if her mom would ever come home. Harry asked if it was his fault. Again, I had to sit them down, look them in the eyes, and explain. Your mom made some poor choices. She needs help. This isn't your fault. None of it is your fault. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of relief in their eyes. Like they'd been carrying the weight of her behavior on their small shoulders, wondering what they had done wrong. The custody evaluator recommended supervised visits only, but Caitlin refused. Said the system was biased against mothers. So right now, she has no visitation rights at all. The kids can only see her if she agrees to counseling, which she won't. It's a tragedy, honestly. But for Susan and Harry, it's also been a blessing. They've stopped walking on eggshells. Susan's stomachaches have disappeared. Harry is finally sleeping through the night again. They still ask about their mom, sure. But there's no fear in their voices anymore. Kim. I don't even know how to describe what she's been through in all this. Most people would have walked away. And I wouldn't have blamed her for it. But she didn't. She stood by me. Even when Caitlin's chaos bled into her own life and career. Even when it meant living under a shadow of fear. If anything, it brought us closer. We decided to move in together after the trial. Kim's house is in a better school district. And it felt like a fresh start. Susan and Harry were excited, picked out their new bedrooms right away. We're not rushing into marriage. But for the first time in a long time, I can see a future. A real one. And as for me, I've learned more than I ever wanted to about resilience. About boundaries. About how far you have to go sometimes to protect the people you love. The restraining order remains in effect for another 2 years. And truthfully, I don't think Caitlin will ever change. When she gets out, we'll have to stay vigilant. Document everything. Involve law enforcement if she so much as steps out of line. People have told me to forgive her, for the kids' sake. But here's what I've realized. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone keep hurting you. Forgiveness doesn't mean erasing consequences. My kids are safer and happier without her chaos in their daily lives. And that matters more than keeping up appearances of family. If Caitlin ever truly gets help, real help, maybe supervised visits could happen one day. But until then, the priority is keeping Susan and Harry safe. Period. So that's where I am now. Picking up the pieces. Trying to give my kids the kind of stability they deserve. And building something real with Kim, one day at a time. You'd think that after the trial, after the sentencing, after the judge slammed that gavel down and declared Caitlin guilty, I'd finally be able to breathe. And in a way, I did. For the first time in years, there was no car circling the block, no surprise appearance in my driveway, no screaming matches in public. But here's the thing about going through something like this. The silence doesn't always feel like peace. Sometimes, it feels like waiting. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. In those first few weeks after Caitlin was taken away, the house felt lighter. Susan and Harry walked through the door after school without the shadow of fear on their faces. Kim could leave her office without scanning the parking lot. I could sleep through the night without jolting awake at every sound outside. But the scars? They were still there. Susan had gotten used to being interrogated by her mother. She was still hesitant to talk freely, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Harry, sweet Harry, still asked at bedtime, "Daddy, is Mommy mad at me?" And every time, it crushed me. That's when I knew we couldn't just sweep everything under the rug. We needed help. So I found a family counselor, someone who specialized in children of unstable parents. The first session was tough. Susan sat with her arms crossed, barely saying a word. Harry clung to my side like a shadow. But slowly, week by week, they started opening up. Susan admitted she felt like she had to pick sides, and that no matter what, she'd make one parent mad. Harry admitted he thought Mommy's anger was his fault because he didn't listen enough. Hearing that broke me in ways I can't explain, but the counselor helped. She told them, over and over, that they were kids, not referees, that their mom's behavior wasn't their responsibility to fix. And I saw it click. Little by little, Kim came with us to some of the sessions. She wanted the kids to know she wasn't trying to take their mom's place, just to be someone safe, someone steady. And the counselor actually encouraged that. Because if there's one thing kids need after chaos, it's consistency. Meanwhile, I was learning my own lessons. You see, I had spent 15 years making excuses for Caitlin. Telling myself her anger wasn't that bad, that if I just worked harder, came home earlier, did more around the house, she'd stop lashing out. That it was on me to make her happy. But sitting in that counselor's office, listening to Susan and Harry pour out fears they should never have had to carry, I realized something. I hadn't just failed myself, I had failed them. By staying in that toxic marriage, by letting Caitlin's temper dominate our home, I had shown them the wrong version of what family should look like. And that realization cut deeper than anything Caitlin ever threw at me. Kim. She showed me the difference. With her, arguments didn't turn into screaming matches. Disagreements weren't weapons. If something bothered her, she'd say it. Calmly. Directly. And then we'd work through it. No slammed doors. No broken dishes. No kids hiding in their rooms. That's what I wanted Susan and Harry to see. What I wanted them to carry into their own futures. Still, the ghost of Caitlin lingered. The restraining order was in place, yes, but I couldn't shake the image of her in that courtroom, screaming that it was all Kim's fault. The way her eyes had burned with fury as she was dragged out. 18 months in jail sounded like a long time, but in reality, it wasn't. And I knew she'd come out angrier than ever, so we prepared. Security cameras at the house, extra locks on the doors, even a plan with the kids about what to do if they ever saw their mom show up unexpectedly. I hated putting that weight on their shoulders. But it was better than pretending the danger wasn't real. One night, not long after the trial, Susan came to me with a question. We were sitting at the kitchen table, homework spread out between us, when she looked up with those big serious eyes and said, "Daddy, do you think Mommy will ever get better?" I paused. How do you answer something like that? "I don't know, sweetheart," I said finally. "But what I do know is that you don't have to fix her. That's not your job. Mommy has to choose to get help. And until she does, it's our job to keep you safe." She nodded, biting her lip, and then whispered, "I like it better here. It's quiet." That quiet, what most people take for granted, that had become the greatest gift of all. As for Connor? Well, life has a funny way of circling back. After testifying against Caitlin, he ended up moving in with Linda again. Word around town was they were trying to patch things up. Counseling, slow steps, the whole deal. Did I care? Not really. Connor had made his bed the day he crossed that line with Caitlin. But if he was finally trying to be a better man, good for him. It didn't erase what he'd done to me or my kids, but maybe it gave him a chance to salvage something of his own life. I focused on what mattered. My kids, my work, and Kim. Kim and I weren't rushing into marriage, but we were building something real. Susan and Harry adored her, not because she tried to buy their affection or replace their mom, but because she respected them. She saw them as people, and after everything, that meant more than words could say. Life wasn't perfect. There were still scars, still worries. But for the first time in years, it felt like we were standing on solid ground again. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Sometimes, the storms don't end in fireworks. Sometimes, the victory is just peace. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that peace is fragile. You can build it brick by brick, protect it with everything you've got. But there's always a part of you that wonders how long it'll last. And for me, that worry had a name. Caitlin. Even with her behind bars, even with a restraining order in place, there were nights when I'd catch myself staring out the window, half expecting to see her car idling across the street. Susan and Harry seemed lighter, yes, but the questions still came. When's Mommy coming back? Will she be nice this time? Can she visit us at school? And every time, I had to walk that razor-thin line between honesty and protection. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to pile fear onto their little shoulders. So I told them the truth in pieces. That Mommy was sick in ways people couldn't see. That she had to get help before she could be around them again. That it wasn't their fault. It was never their fault. It took months, but slowly, they started to believe it. And in those months, life began to feel normal. Kim and I moved our little family into her house. It wasn't big, but it had a warmth mine never did. Susan picked the bedroom with the bay window, declaring it her reading spot. Harry chose the one with the biggest closet, because apparently, it made the perfect fort. We planted flowers in the backyard, roasted marshmallows on a fire pit, laughed around the dinner table. For the first time in a long time, the house echoed with joy instead of fear. But normal doesn't erase history. One evening, after tucking the kids into bed, I sat on the couch with Kim. She leaned her head against my shoulder and said, "James, do you ever think about forgiving her?" The question caught me off guard. Forgiving Caitlin? After everything? I thought about the broken doors, the screaming, the stalking. About Susan crying at that campsite, asking why Mommy was so mean. About Harry clinging to Kim's leg in terror. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone keep hurting you, I said quietly. And right now, the kids are safer without her. That's what matters. Kim nodded, her hand finding mine. I just don't want you carrying all that anger forever. You deserve peace too. She was right. I knew she was right. But letting go of anger is easier said than done. Meanwhile, Connor and Linda's situation was the talk of the town. Word had spread that they were in counseling, trying to rebuild. Some people thought it was romantic second chances, love after chaos. Others shook their heads, saying Linda was out of her mind for taking him back. Me? I stayed out of it. Connor's choices had wrecked my life once. I wasn't about to let his redemption arc become my problem. Still, I couldn't deny there was a strange sense of closure in knowing he was finally facing the fallout of his own decisions. And then came the day Caitlin's lawyer filed an appeal. I remember sitting in my lawyer's office, listening as he explained. She wanted to reduce her sentence, arguing again that her behavior was a mental health crisis, and not deliberate malice. I felt the blood rush to my face. Mental health crisis? She plotted to hurt Kim. She stalked my kids. She wrote in her journal about making accidents happen. My lawyer held up a hand, calm as ever. James, I know. And the court knows. But appeals happen. It doesn't mean she'll win. It just means we need to be prepared. And that word again, prepared. That had become my life. The good news? The appeal was denied. The court upheld the conviction, citing the overwhelming evidence of calculated behavior. But just hearing her name in that context again was enough to send a chill through me. It was like she had this way of reaching out from behind bars, reminding me that she wasn't gone. Not really. That night, I found Susan sitting on her bed, staring out the window. "Hey kiddo," I said softly, sitting beside her. "What's on your mind?" She shrugged, her little shoulders tight. "I heard someone at school say Mommy's in jail. Is that true?" I hesitated. The counselor had told me honesty was better than half-truths, as long as it was age-appropriate. So I nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. It's true. Mommy made some choices that weren't safe, and the judge said she has to take time to get help before she can be with people again." Susan was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "I don't want her to come back if she's going to be mean." And in that moment, I realized kids are smarter than we give them credit for. She didn't need sugarcoating. She needed safety. So that's what I promised her. Safety. Stability. A childhood where she didn't have to flinch at every slammed door. Harry, on the other hand, still clung to hope. "Maybe Mommy will get better," he'd say. And I'd smile sadly, telling him, "Maybe, buddy. But until then we're going to be okay right here." Because we were. For the first time, we were okay. Life wasn't glamorous, it wasn't perfect. But it was ours. And after everything Caitlin had put us through, that felt like the biggest victory of all. By the time Caitlin had been behind bars for a few months, a strange thing happened. I started remembering what peace actually felt like. It wasn't fireworks or grand gestures. It was the quiet hum of ordinary days, the sound of Susan's laughter drifting from her bedroom, Harry running through the living room with his socks sliding on the hardwood floor, Kim humming softly while cooking dinner. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a home. But here's the thing about trauma. Even when the storm passes, the echoes stick around. I'd catch myself checking the locks 3 times before bed, jumping at the sight of an unfamiliar car parked down the street, flinching when the phone rang late at night. Even though Caitlin was physically gone, the memory of her chaos lingered. The kids felt it too. Susan started thriving at school again, straight A's, even joined the choir. But she still hesitated when teachers mentioned parents, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to talk about both. Harry became more playful, more open. But bedtime was still hard. Some nights he'd crawl into my room, whispering, "Daddy, I had a dream Mommy was mad." That's the part no one tells you about messy divorces and toxic relationships. It doesn't just end when the papers are signed. The damage seeps into every corner of your kids' lives, and you spend years undoing it. One gentle reassurance at a time. Kim, though she was a light through it all, she never tried to take Caitlin's place. She never forced herself into moments with the kids. She just showed up, consistently, with kindness and patience. And because of that, Susan and Harry started letting her in. One night, after dinner, Susan surprised us all. She looked at Kim and said, "Can you come to my choir concert next week?" Kim blinked, caught off guard. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" Susan nodded. "Yeah. I want you there. I swear." My heart nearly burst. That tiny sentence carried so much weight. It meant Susan was starting to see Kim as safe, as family. And Harry? He already adored her. To him, Kim was the one who built forts out of blankets, who taught him how to make pancakes in funny shapes, who never once raised her voice. He'd tell his friends proudly, "Kim's coming with us." Like it was the most natural thing in the world. For me, watching those bonds form was healing in ways I didn't expect. After Caitlin, I'd wondered if love was even possible again. If trust was something I could feel, or if it had been burned out of me completely. But Kim proved me wrong. Still, I couldn't shake the worry about Caitlin's release. 18 months wasn't forever. And knowing her, she'd come out angrier than ever, ready to pick up right where she left off. That fear kept me on edge. And it wasn't just paranoia, because even behind bars, Caitlin found ways to make her presence felt. Her lawyer filed motion after motion, claiming the system was unfair, claiming she was the victim. Each one was denied, but each one dragged her name back into my life, like a ghost I couldn't exorcise. Then one day, I got a letter. It came through official channels, monitored correspondence from Caitlin. My lawyer had warned me she might try, and he advised me not to respond. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was pages long, rambling, accusations mixed with apologies, though the apologies always circled back to blaming me. She said Kim had ruined everything, that I'd turned the kids against her, that the world was conspiring to make her look like a monster. And then, at the end, she wrote something that chilled me to the bone. "When I get out, James, I'm taking back what's mine." I folded the letter carefully, slid it into an envelope, and handed it straight to my lawyer. He nodded grimly, adding it to the growing pile of evidence. "This will only help us keep the restraining order tight," he said. But deep down, I knew it was proof that nothing had changed. She hadn't learned. She hadn't reflected. She was just waiting. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, lights off, staring at the quiet street outside. And I realized something. I couldn't let fear dictate my life anymore, so I made a choice. I wasn't going to live looking over my shoulder. I wasn't going to let Caitlin's shadow poison the peace we'd fought so hard for. Instead, I was going to double down on building something stronger. For me. For Susan. For Harry. For Kim. We planted roots. Literally. Kim and I started a garden in the backyard. The kids helped dig up soil, plant tomatoes, peppers, herbs. Watching those little green shoots push through the dirt became a kind of therapy for all of us. Proof that life can grow even after devastation. We started new traditions: Friday movie nights, Sunday pancake breakfasts, evening walks with the dog Kim had adopted before we met. They were small things, but they stitched our family together in a way Caitlin never could tear apart. And slowly, the fear started losing its grip. I knew the road ahead wasn't free of obstacles. Caitlin's sentence would end. Her obsession might flare again. But for now, we had peace. Real, fragile, precious peace. And I wasn't about to let it go. By the time a full year had passed since Caitlin's sentencing, I'd almost convinced myself that maybe she would fade into the background of our lives, that she'd serve her time, move on, and finally let us live in peace. But deep down, I knew better. Caitlin wasn't the type to let go. She thrived on control, on being the center of attention. And even behind bars, she found ways to remind me she still existed. The letters kept coming. Not just to me, but sometimes to Susan and Harry. Of course, they were intercepted by the system, monitored before being delivered, and my lawyer advised me to keep them sealed. But knowing she was still trying to manipulate even from a cell, it was like a constant itch I couldn't scratch. One letter, though, slipped through before the monitoring tightened. It was addressed to Susan, written in flowery handwriting, full of guilt trips disguised as love. "Mommy misses you so much," it said. "Don't let anyone tell you I'm a bad person. Daddy is just confused. Kim is not your real family. Remember, we belong together." Susan brought it to me, her face pale. "Daddy, why does she write this? I don't understand." And in that moment, I knew the damage Caitlin had done wasn't just about stalking or vandalism. It was psychological. She was planting seeds of confusion, trying to make the kids doubt what was real, what was safe. I folded the letter, added it to the thick binder of evidence I'd been keeping, and looked Susan straight in the eye. "You don't have to understand why she does this," I told her gently. "It's not your job to fix Mommy. It's my job to protect you. And that's exactly what I'm doing." Susan nodded, but I could see the question still swirling behind her eyes. Harry, on the other hand, was easier to reassure. He was young enough to still crave simple answers. "Mommy's sick," I told him one night when he asked about her again. "She needs to get help before she can be around people. There's no day one." He thought about it for a second, then whispered, "Like when I was sick and had to stay home from school?" I smiled, pulling him into a hug. "Exactly like that, buddy. But Mommy's sickness is in her heart and her head, and until she gets help, we can't be around her." It wasn't perfect, but it was enough for him. Meanwhile, Kim and I were finding our rhythm. Living together wasn't without its challenges. Blending a family never is. But compared to the chaos of Caitlin, our little struggles felt like nothing. We learned each other's habits: how Kim likes her coffee with exactly 2 sugars, how I need 10 minutes of silence in the morning before I can function, how the kids both somehow manage to spill milk at every meal. We built traditions: pancake Sundays, backyard camping nights, family board games where Harry always tried to cheat but Susan always caught him. And through it all, Kim proved over and over that she wasn't going anywhere. I'll never forget the night Susan finally let her guard down. We were sitting around the fire pit, roasting marshmallows. Kim leaned back, laughing at something Harry said, when Susan suddenly blurted out, "I like it better here." The air went quiet for a second. Kim looked surprised. "Better than what, sweetheart?" Susan stared into the fire, her voice soft. "Better than when Mom was here. It's not loud anymore. It's safe." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. Kim didn't push. She just reached over, squeezed Susan's hand, and said, "That's all I want, honey. For you to feel safe." And in that moment, I knew Kim wasn't just my partner. She was becoming their safe place too. But even as life moved forward, the clock was ticking. Caitlin's 18-month sentence wasn't forever. Each month that passed brought us closer to her release. And though the judge had ordered therapy, evaluations, anger management before she could petition for custody, I knew Caitlin. She'd fight tooth and nail. She'd twist every angle, manipulate every loophole, just to claw her way back into our lives. So we stayed vigilant. I kept the cameras rolling. Kept every scrap of evidence in my binder. Checked in with my lawyer regularly. And late at night, when the kids were asleep and Kim was curled up beside me, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering, when she comes back, will we be ready? Time has this strange way of speeding up when you're dreading something. Each day felt like it slipped past faster than the last, and before I knew it, Caitlin's release date was drawing near. 18 months. That was the sentence. At first, it had felt like a lifetime. But as the months ticked by, I realized it wasn't long at all. The kids didn't know the exact timeline. I hadn't told them when she'd be getting out, because what good would it do? Why burden them with counting down the days until chaos might return? But I knew, and Kim knew, and we both felt the weight of that clock ticking louder every night. In the meantime, life marched on. Susan had her first choir concert, and when she spotted Kim and me in the audience, her whole face lit up. Harry joined a local soccer league, running across the field with a joy I hadn't seen in him for years. These were the moments I clung to. Proof that despite everything, my kids could still have a childhood. That they weren't defined by their mother's mistakes. But the shadow of Caitlin loomed, even from behind bars. About 3 months before her scheduled release, my lawyer called. She's filed a motion, he said. I sighed, already exhausted. Of course she has. What now? She's asking for early release on good behavior. I nearly dropped the phone. Good behavior? This woman stalked my girlfriend, terrorized my kids, vandalized my home, and you're telling me she thinks she's earned a free pass? She won't get it, my lawyer assured me. The court has her full history. But I wanted you to hear it from me before you saw it in the papers. And sure enough, a week later, a local news outlet ran a small piece. Local woman seeks early release. No names in the headline, but in a town our size, everyone knew who it was. The gossip started immediately. At the grocery store, at work, even at church. People whispering about whether Caitlin had paid her dues, whether she deserved another chance. I wanted to scream at them all. You didn't live it. You didn't tuck in kids who were terrified of their own mother. You didn't scrape dried egg off your front door. You didn't read the journal where she wrote about making my girlfriend disappear. But I kept my head down. I focused on my family. And thankfully, the court denied her motion. Still, the reminder was there. Caitlin wasn't done. Not yet. As the release date crept closer, Susan started asking more questions. Daddy, will we ever see Mommy again? I sat her down one night, her hair falling into her face as she fiddled with a pencil. Sweetheart, you might. But only if Mommy gets help. Real help. And only if it's safe. The judge says she has to do certain things before she can see you again. Susan bit her lip. What if she doesn't want to? My chest tightened. Then she doesn't see you. Because my job is to keep you safe. Always. Harry's questions were simpler, but harder in their own way. Will Mommy be happy when she comes back? How do you answer something like that? I hope so, buddy, I told him, ruffling his hair. But even if she's not, we'll be okay. Because we've got each other. Kim and I had late night talks about it constantly. What if she tries again? Kim would ask. Her voice quiet but steady. What if she doesn't stop? And the truth was, I didn't know. But I did know this. We weren't the same people we were before. I wasn't the man who made excuses for Caitlin anymore. Susan and Harry weren't the kids walking on eggshells. And Kim, well, Kim had shown me what real strength looked like. We had a plan, documentation, security, a support system, and a bond forged through fire. Still, as her release day got closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real test hadn't even started yet. Because sometimes, surviving the storm isn't the hardest part. Sometimes, it's what comes after. The day Caitlin walked out of jail, the air in town felt heavier. It wasn't like she came straight to my doorstep, thank God, but just knowing she was free again, it was like hearing the rattle of a snake in tall grass. You don't see it, but you know it's there. And you know you can't let your guard down. I'd prepared for this. Cameras at the house, alerts on my phone, neighbors I trusted keeping an eye out. My lawyer had already filed to extend the restraining order, armed with Caitlin's letters and her outbursts in court. But still, I couldn't stop the tension that gripped me every time I pulled into the driveway or heard a car slow down near the house. The first week was quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no letters, no sightings. Susan even asked, maybe Mommy really did get better? I wanted to believe that. I wanted it more than anything. But week 2 shattered that fragile hope. Kim came home from work one evening, her face pale. James, she said, setting her bag down with shaking hands. She was outside my building. My stomach dropped. Are you sure? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Kim nodded. She didn't say anything. Just stood there, across the street, watching. And when I left, she got into her car and followed me for 3 blocks before turning off. We called the police immediately. They logged the incident, reminded us the restraining order was still in effect, said they'd look into it. But anyone who's ever dealt with stalking knows how hollow those words feel. Until Caitlin did something dramatic, their hands were tied. The next few days were a blur of paranoia. Every knock at the door, every strange car outside, set my nerves on fire. I didn't tell the kids the details, but they could feel it. Kids always do. Then came the school incident. Susan's choir was performing in the auditorium, and the whole town was there. Kim and I sat in the middle rows, Harry squirming beside me. The kids filed onto the stage, and I felt a swell of pride watching Susan in her little blue dress. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her, Caitlin. She was sitting in the very back row, sunglasses on indoors like she was trying to disguise herself. But I'd have known that posture anywhere. I froze. My pulse pounded in my ears. Kim leaned in, whispering, "James, is that?" I nodded. "Yeah. It's her." We didn't make a scene. I didn't want to ruin Susan's performance. But the second it ended, I went straight to the principal. By the time we got outside, Caitlin was gone. The police said they'd follow up, but again, without direct contact or proof of harassment, it was another report in a file. Still, the school tightened their security, and the principal promised Caitlin wouldn't be allowed near campus again. That night, Susan asked me why I looked so upset. I took a deep breath, pulled her close, and said, "Because I love you. And my job is to make sure you're safe. That's all you need to know right now." She nodded, trusting me. But I could see the worry in her eyes. Kim and I stayed up late after the kids were asleep. She poured us both a glass of wine, her hands still trembling. "James, how long can this go on? How long before she does something worse?" I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing. Caitlin hadn't changed. Prison hadn't cured her obsession. And as much as I wanted to shield my kids from it all, we were right back in the line of fire. So we doubled down. I installed more cameras, upgraded the alarm system, even taught Susan and Harry what to do if they ever felt unsafe, who to call, where to run. I hated it. Hated putting that kind of weight on their little shoulders. But pretending the danger wasn't real wasn't an option anymore. Because Caitlin wasn't just back, she was watching. And I had the sickening feeling she was waiting for the right moment to strike. The weeks after Caitlin showed up at Susan's school were some of the hardest I've ever lived through. Every day felt like walking a tightrope, waiting to see where she'd appear next. Kim tried to keep things normal for the kids, but I could see the strain in her face. She'd smile through dinner, laugh at Harry's jokes, clap for Susan's singing, but when the kids were asleep, her shoulders would slump, and the fear would spill out in her eyes. We weren't just living anymore. We were surviving. Then, it escalated again. It was a Thursday evening. Kim had stayed late at work for a presentation. I was at home helping Harry with math homework when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I didn't see anyone at all, just the empty porch. But when I opened the door, there was an envelope sitting on the welcome mat. No name, no stamp, just slid under the door like whoever left it had been right there. My heart sank before I even picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No threats, no rambling accusations this time. Just a photo. A photo of Kim walking to her car in the office parking lot. Taken from across the street. The timestamp in the corner was from the night before. I called the police immediately, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. They came, took the photo, logged it as evidence. But again, without catching Caitlin in the act, there wasn't much they could do besides investigate. Kim sat on the couch that night, staring at the empty fireplace. "James," she whispered, "this is getting dangerous. What if she snaps? There's sarches with around a nightstand of them won't need with well. There's sarches with ound in the camises with around." I pulled her close, but I had no answer. The truth was, Caitlin had already snapped. We were just waiting to see how far she'd go. The next day, I met with my lawyer. He was blunt. "We need to push for a criminal charge of violating the restraining order. You've got enough evidence. The photo, the school sighting, the stalking at her workplace. This isn't just harassment, it's escalation." So we filed. But Caitlin was slippery. She knew the boundaries of the law just well enough to dance right on the edge of them. She didn't make direct contact. She didn't speak to us. She just watched. And sometimes, the watching was worse than words. Susan started noticing too. One night she whispered, "Daddy, I think Mommy was at my soccer practice. I saw someone who looked like her by the fence." Harry, bless his heart, tried to brush it off. "No way, Susie. Mommy's not allowed here." But I could see the uncertainty in his little eyes. I drove them straight home, my stomach in knots. Kim and I spent that evening making a plan. We can't just react anymore. she said. We need to take control. We need to show her she can't scare us into silence. She was right. So I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I hired a private investigator. The guy was ex-law enforcement. Quiet, professional. The kind of man who spoke in clipped sentences and carried himself like he'd seen it all. He started tailing Caitlin, documenting her movements, and within a week, we had proof. Photos of her parked outside Kim's office. Notes on how she followed Susan's school bus for 2 miles before breaking off. Records of her circling our block late at night. It was everything we needed and more than I wanted to know. Seeing it on paper, in black and white, drove home a chilling truth. Caitlin wasn't just obsessed. She was building patterns, watching routines, studying us. The PI handed me the file with a grim look. She's escalating. It's only a matter of time before she crosses a line you can't come back from. You need to act now. So we did. My lawyer filed an emergency petition to have her probation revoked and her sentence reinstated. The court date was set for the following week, but Caitlin must have caught wind of it, because 2 nights before the hearing, it happened. The thing I'd feared all along. It was late just after midnight when I heard the noise. A faint scratching at the back door. Like someone trying to jimmy it open. At first, I thought maybe it was the wind, or the dog shifting around in the yard. But then came the sound of glass tapping, deliberate and sharp. I was on my feet instantly, adrenaline surging. The kids were asleep upstairs. Kim was dozing on the couch beside me. I motioned for her to stay quiet, grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the door, and crept toward the kitchen. That's when I saw her. Through the glass pane of the back door, illuminated by the porch light, stood Caitlin. Her hair was wild, her eyes wide, and in her hand was a folded piece of paper. She pressed it against the glass, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Kim gasped softly behind me, and Caitlin's head snapped toward the sound. Her face twisted into something between rage and triumph, like she'd finally gotten what she came for. I didn't open the door. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my phone, dialed 911, and told the operator flat out, my ex-wife, under restraining order, is at my back door right now. Within minutes, red and blue lights flooded the street. But by the time officers stormed the backyard, Caitlin was gone. She'd vanished into the night, leaving only that folded paper pressed against the glass. When I finally opened the door to retrieve it, my stomach dropped. Inside wasn't a rant or a threat this time. It was a drawing done in crayon, in Susan's handwriting. One of her school assignments that had been in her backpack earlier that week. A picture of our family. Me, Susan, Harry, and Kim standing in front of the house. Across the top, in bold black marker, Caitlin had scrawled, "This is wrong. I'm fixing it." My blood ran cold. That was no longer obsession. That was intent. The police took it as evidence immediately. The officer looked me dead in the eye and said, "We're not treating this as harassment anymore. This is a credible threat." The next 48 hours were a blur. Kim took the kids to her sister's house 2 towns over while I stayed behind with officers cycling through, installing extra patrols, ensuring the restraining order violation would stick. The private investigator's file sealed it. With the evidence of her stalking layered on top of this incident, the court had no choice. The emergency hearing was granted. In front of the judge, Caitlin didn't even try to deny it. She claimed she just wanted to deliver a message, that she hadn't meant harm. But when the prosecutor held up that crayon drawing with her handwriting scrawled across it, the whole courtroom went silent. The judge didn't hesitate. Her probation was revoked, sentence reinstated. Caitlin was ordered back into custody immediately. As bailiffs escorted her out, she shouted one last time, voice cracking, "You can't erase me. I'll always be their mother," and then she was gone. I sat there, shaking, Kim gripping my hand so tightly it hurt. Relief flooded through me, but it was tangled with something else, grief. Because no matter how much damage Caitlin had done, no matter how dangerous she'd become, she was still Susan and Harry's mom. And now, she was gone from their lives completely. That night, when I picked the kids up from Kim's sister's house, Susan asked the question I'd been dreading. "Daddy, where's Mommy now?" I knelt down, meeting her eyes. "Sweetheart, Mommy made choices that weren't safe. The judge said she has to go back and get help before she can see anyone again." Susan nodded slowly, like she'd expected the answer but needed to hear it out loud. Harry, though, looked confused. "But she saw me at school. She waved at me." "Was that bad?" My heart cracked. "Buddy, it wasn't your fault. Mommy's not supposed to do that, and it's not safe for her to be around us until she changes." They didn't say much after that. Just clung to me tighter than usual that night as I tucked them into bed. Kim and I sat in the quiet house afterward, both of us staring at the folded drawing still sealed in an evidence bag on the counter. She finally broke the silence. "James, she's not coming back from this, is she?" I shook my head. Not unless she becomes a completely different person. And I don't think she will. For the first time, I believed it. This wasn't just a chapter. This was the ending. And as heartbreaking as it was also a chance. A chance to finally rebuild without shadows looming over us. The days after Caitlin was taken back into custody were surreal. For the first time in years, I could breathe without constantly scanning the shadows. No strange cars parked across the street, no letters slipped under the door, no haunting eyes at the edge of the crowd. But peace doesn't just arrive all at once. It has to be relearned. Susan and Harry had questions, and those questions didn't stop just because Caitlin was behind bars. Will Mommy ever come back? Susan asked one night, her voice small as she sat curled up in her bed. I sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Maybe one day, sweetheart. But only if she gets help. And until then, it's my job to keep you safe. She nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Harry's questions were harder in a different way. He was still young enough to cling to hope. Daddy. When Mommy gets better, can she come live with us again? I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. Buddy. Even if Mommy gets better, she won't live here again. But you'll always have me. And Kim. And Susan. We're your family. And we're not going anywhere. The description with the way on the way. Which would another live. Capes be wild and man. He thought about that for a long time, then whispered, okay. I just don't want you to leave. That's the kind of scar Caitlin left, not just fear of her, but fear that love could vanish overnight. The counselor helped. Week after week, Susan and Harry began unpacking their feelings in that little office filled with coloring books and stuffed animals. Susan admitted she sometimes felt guilty for being relieved that her mom was gone. Harry admitted he missed her even when he was scared of her, and the counselor told them what I'd been saying all along. It's okay to love your mom, and it's okay to feel safe without her. Both things can be true. Would chances Harry, hearing someone else say it, someone who wasn't me, seemed to lift a weight off their shoulders. Meanwhile, Kim was stepping more fully into their lives. Not replacing Caitlin, not trying to be mom, but becoming a safe, steady presence. She was the one Susan asked to braid her hair before school, the one Harry asked to cheer the loudest at his soccer games. And every time I saw it, my heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and awe, because Kim had a choice. She could have walked away when Caitlin's chaos spilled over into her life. She could have said it was too much, too dangerous, too messy. But she didn't. She stayed. And in staying, she gave us something Caitlin never could: stability. But here's the thing. As much as I wanted to shut the door on Caitlin completely, the system wouldn't let us. Every few months, there were hearings. Updates on her sentence. Reviews of her compliance with anger management and psychological evaluations. Each time, her lawyer tried to argue she'd improved, that she was ready for supervised visits. Each time, the judge looked at the evidence, looked at the stack of letters and threats, and said no. But just hearing her name in those courtrooms, just seeing her face on those Zoom calls from the correctional facility, was enough to reopen old wounds. Susan once overheard me talking on the phone with my lawyer about an upcoming hearing. She pulled me aside later, her eyes wide with fear. Daddy, is Mommy coming back? I knelt down, holding her hands. Not unless it's safe. And right now, it's not. I promise you. I won't let anyone hurt you. She nodded, but I could see the relief in her shoulders, like she'd been holding her breath. Life slowly found a rhythm. School, soccer, choir, dinners around the table. We celebrated birthdays, built gingerbread houses at Christmas, took a trip to the beach where Harry spent hours chasing waves and Susan collected seashells. And through it all, Kim was there laughing, holding my hand, making the kids feel like they belonged in a story that wasn't defined by chaos. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself thinking about Caitlin. Not in longing God. No, but in grief. Grief for what could have been, for the mother she could have been to Susan and Harry, if only she'd chosen love over obsession. But grief is different from guilt, and I was learning that difference every day. Because no matter how much pain Caitlin caused, the truth was clear. The kids were safer without her. Happier without her. And that's what mattered most. The day Kim and I took Susan and Harry to the park and watched them race each other across the grass, laughing so hard they collapsed in a pile, I realized something. This quiet, imperfect, ordinary joy was our victory. Caitlin couldn't take it from us. Not anymore. By the second year after Caitlin's sentencing, the storm she created finally started to feel like a memory instead of a daily threat. But memories have a way of sneaking up on you. It happened one spring afternoon. Susan was working on a school project about family trees. She sat at the kitchen table, carefully writing names on little slips of paper. Daddy, can I put Kim on here? She asked. I froze for a second, caught between pride and sorrow. Of course you can, sweetheart, I said. She's part of your family. Susan smiled, taping Kim's name right next to mine. Then, almost as an afterthought, she picked up another slip. Should I put mommy too? My chest tightened. Yes, I said finally. She's still your mom. That doesn't change, even if she can't be here with us right now. Susan nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. The project was simple for other kids' names and branches. For her, it was a map of loss and survival. Harry's innocence showed in moments like that too. He once asked, "Daddy, when mommy's better, can she come to my soccer games?" Kim can come too. It is in the lodging mark, and Mike hated his great sexes of lies. The way he said it so hopeful, so simple made my heart ache. Because for him, love wasn't complicated. He just wanted everyone he cared about in the same place, cheering for him. But reality doesn't work that way. And I had to be the one to keep him grounded. Even when it broke me. Maybe one day, buddy. I told him gently. But for now, Kim and I will always be there. Every game. Meanwhile, Caitlin's name still appeared in court updates. Her lawyer kept filing petitions, supervised visits, reduced probation, early evaluations. Each time, my lawyer and I pushed back with the same binder of evidence. Each time, the judge sided with us. It wasn't even a close call anymore. Caitlin refused therapy, refused accountability. She wanted access to the kids without doing the work to earn it. And the system, for once, stood firm. But even as the law held the line, the emotional toll lingered. One night, Kim and I were sitting on the porch after the kids went to bed. The stars were out. The kind of quiet night you dream of when life has been loud for too long. She leaned her head against my shoulder and said, "James, when does it end? When do we stop looking over our shoulders?" I didn't have an easy answer. Maybe never, I admitted. But maybe that's okay. Because every day she doesn't show up. Every day the kids laugh without fear. That's a win. That was in the braided night frost. Kim sighed, her hand tightening around mine. I just want them to grow up without thinking chaos is normal. And that hit me hard, because she was right. My kids deserved more than survival. They deserved joy, stability, the freedom to be kids, not casualties of their mother's obsession. That summer, we took them on a camping trip, something I hadn't dared to do since Caitlin ambushed us at the state park years before. This time though, it was different. We hiked trails, roasted marshmallows, told stories under the stars. No shouting matches, no police, no fear, just us, watching Susan giggle as she tried to tell a ghost story. Hearing Harry's snores from inside the tent, feeling Kim's hand in mine as the fire crackled. I realized we were rewriting the memories Caitlin had tainted, and maybe that's the real victory. Not erasing the past, but building new moments strong enough to outweigh it. Of course, the shadow of her release still lingered. We knew her probation would eventually end. We knew she might try again, but by then, we were stronger. Not because Caitlin had broken us, but because we'd chosen not to stay broken. And for the first time, I believed no matter what she tried, she couldn't take that away. Looking back now, it feels like a lifetime ago. The chaos, the stalking, the endless fear of Caitlin's next move. Sometimes I wonder how I even functioned back then. How I managed to go to work, raise my kids, and hold everything together when my world felt like it was constantly under siege. But here's the truth I've come to accept. Survival shapes you. It teaches you what matters, what doesn't, and who you can trust when everything else falls apart. For me, the lesson was simple. My kids come first. Always. Susan is a teenager now. And every time I watch her step on stage with her choir, confident and smiling, I think about that scared little girl who once cried at a campsite because her mom was screaming in front of strangers. Harry's growing like a weed, playing soccer like it's his whole world. And I think about those nights he whispered, "Daddy, is mommy mad at me?" They've come so far. We all have. Kim's still here too. More than that, she's become the backbone of this family. She never tried to erase Caitlin. Never asked the kids to call her Mom. She just showed up. Every day. With patience. And love. And because of that, she earned something Caitlin never could. Their trust. We've built a life together, one that isn't flashy or perfect, but real. Pancake breakfasts, messy soccer cleats by the door, Susan's music drifting through the house, late night talks on the porch with Kim. These are the moments that matter. The ones Caitlin's chaos can't touch. As for Caitlin, the last I heard, she's still fighting the system, still refusing the therapy that might actually help her, still blaming everyone else for the fallout of her choices. I don't know if she'll ever change. I don't know if she's even capable of it. And here's the part that took me the longest to learn. That's not my responsibility anymore. For years, I thought if I worked harder, if I gave more, if I sacrificed enough, I could fix her anger. her bitterness, her obsession. But you can't fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. You can only protect yourself and the people you love. That's what I'm doing now. That's what I'll keep doing. Some people have told me to forgive her, to let it go for the sake of peace. And maybe one day, I'll find a way to forgive, not for her, but for me. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean letting someone back into your life when they've proven over and over they're dangerous. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will be about releasing the weight of her choices from my own heart, not about erasing the consequences. The kids still ask about her sometimes, and I tell them the truth. Mommy loves you, in her own way. But love isn't enough if it isn't safe. What matters is that you are loved. Right here. Every single day. And they are. Fiercely. Unconditionally. So maybe this story doesn't end with a dramatic showdown or a picture-perfect happy ending. Maybe it ends with something quieter, a family rebuilt, a house filled with laughter instead of shouting, a future shaped not by fear, but by choice. Because in the end, that's the real victory. Not that Caitlin lost, but that we won. We chose peace. We chose each other. We chose to live, not just survive. And no matter what shadows linger, no matter what the future brings, that's something she can never take from us. One afternoon, as we sat together in the quiet of her living room, she said, "Anthony, promise me something." "Anything," I replied. "Promise me you'll keep choosing peace, even when it's hard, because that's the only thing that lasts." I squeezed her hand and promised. And I meant it. Reflection. Looking back, I realized how far things had come. From the phone call where Melissa demanded I pay her mortgage, to the bitter fights over the cabin, to the family dinners that felt like battlefields. Those moments had nearly broken me, but they had also remade me. They taught me to stand up for myself. They taught me to value peace over appearances. And they taught me that love doesn't mean sacrifice without limits. Closing thoughts. If you've made it this far, maybe you've carried the same kind of weight I did. Maybe you've been the one who held everything together while no one held you. Maybe you've been told that family means giving until there's nothing left of you. But here's what I've learned. Family can be love. But love without respect is just control. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary. And choosing peace, even when it costs you something, is never the wrong choice. Because at the end of the day, peace isn't just freedom from chaos. It's the foundation for everything good that comes after. And for me, that's the life I'm finally living. The funny thing about peace is that once you taste it, you start to realize how little you ever had it before. In the past, my life was measured in crises. Melissa's latest demand, my parents' guilt trips, the looming threat of losing the cabin. It was constant noise, constant tension. Now, the quiet felt almost strange, but in the best way. Life in balance. In my city, I had finally settled into routines that weren't about survival, but about joy. Mornings started with runs by the river. Evenings often ended with photography projects or quiet dinners with Sarah. Work was fulfilling, not draining. And I no longer felt like I was carrying a second unpaid full-time job just managing my family's chaos. It felt like life had shifted from black and white to full color. Melissa's continued growth. Updates about Melissa kept coming, usually through grandma or my mom. She had not only kept her library job but had been promoted to a supervisory role. She was paying rent, keeping up with bills, and even starting to save. It wasn't the dramatic success story some people might imagine. But for Melissa, it was huge. And the most surprising part? She wasn't blaming me anymore. I didn't get passive-aggressive texts. I didn't get cryptic Facebook posts. Just silence and, in its own way, respect. Parents easing up. My parents were slowly changing too. They no longer pressured me with guilt trips about stepping up for family. Instead, our conversations were about everyday life. What I was cooking, how work was going. My mom even asked about my photography, genuinely curious rather than dismissive. It wasn't perfect. They still had moments where old habits slipped through, but overall, it felt like the weight between us had lightened. A moment with grandma. Grandma's health was declining, but her clarity was still sharp. One evening, I visited her and told her about Melissa's progress. She smiled, her hands resting on mine. "See, Anthony? Sometimes the hardest no brings the strongest growth. You carried enough for long enough. Now you get to watch her learn to carry herself." Her words filled me with a quiet pride. Because for so long, I had doubted myself. Wondered if saying no had been selfish. Wondered if I had done the wrong thing. But now, it was clear. That no had been the most loving thing I could have done for her, for my parents, and for myself. Sarah's role. Through all of this, Sarah became an anchor. One evening, as we cooked dinner together, she said, "Anthony, do you realize you've built a whole new life? One that's not about what you had to escape, but what you've chosen to create?" Her words stopped me. Because she was right. I wasn't just running from the past anymore. I was building toward a future. A future defined not by obligation, but by choice. Reflection. As I think about it now, I see the arc so clearly. It started with Melissa's demand that I pay her mortgage. It spiraled into chaos, threats, family battles, the loss of the cabin. For years, it felt like I was drowning. But in the end, all of it forced me to learn the lesson I'd been avoiding. That peace isn't given to you by others. You claim it for yourself. And when you do, everything changes. Closing thoughts. If you've ever carried the kind of weight I did, I want to remind you, you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to build a life that's yours. And you're allowed to choose peace, even when others call it selfish. Because, at the end of the day, the people who love you will learn to respect your boundaries. And the people who don't? They were never respecting you to begin with. That's the lesson I carry now. By now, the storm had long passed. Melissa had her own job, my parents had eased up, and Grandma's wisdom had become the compass I carried into every decision. I had reclaimed my peace, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't bracing for the next disaster. But endings aren't really endings. They're transitions. And this final part of the story isn't about loss, it's about what came after. Grandma's last lesson. Not long after Melissa started steady work, Grandma's health declined quickly. I was by her side as much as I could be. We talked about everything: life, choices, regrets, and love. One afternoon, she looked at me and said, "Anthony, you're proof that strength isn't about carrying the most weight. It's about knowing when to set it down." Those words were her final gift to me. When she passed, the family gathered. For once, there were no fights, no accusations, no drama. Just grief, and the quiet acknowledgement that she had been the glue holding us together. And as I stood there, I realized something. The lesson she had taught me wasn't just for my family. It was for my life. Melissa at the funeral. At the funeral, Melissa approached me. Her eyes were red, her voice soft. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "Not for money, not for saving me, but for finally making me face myself." I nodded. "You don't have to thank me. Just keep going. That's thanks enough." For the first time, I believed she would. The cabin's shadow. After Grandma's passing, talk of the cabin surfaced again. Not in anger this time, but in memories. People shared stories, fishing trips, birthdays, summer nights under the stars. The pain of losing it was still there, but somehow lighter. Because I realized, the cabin wasn't just wood and nails. It was the moments inside it. And those moments lived on, even if the property didn't. A new chapter. Back in my city, I started focusing more on my future. Sarah and I grew closer. We didn't rush, but there was something solid between us. She was steady, kind, and real. With her, I didn't feel like the fixer. I didn't feel like the one holding the world up. I just felt like myself. And for the first time, I started imagining what it would be like to build something new with her. Or with someone. On my own terms. Reflection. Looking back on the entire journey, I see it clearly now. It began with a demand that I pay Melissa's mortgage. It spiraled into fights, threats, guilt, and the loss of the cabin. At the time, it felt like my world was falling apart. But in truth, it was falling into place. Because those battles forced me to learn what I had avoided for years. That family love without respect is just control. And peace is something you choose, not something you beg for. Closing thoughts. So here's the final takeaway. You are not selfish for saying no. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. And you are not alone in choosing yourself. Even when the people closest to you don't understand. Sometimes the hardest no is the one that saves you. And sometimes, it's the one that gives the people around you the chance to grow. 2. Melissa didn't need me to pay her mortgage. She needed me to stop paying it. My parents didn't need me to fix everything. They needed me to let them face the consequences. And I didn't need their approval. I needed my peace. And now, I have it.